Well, that was a very interesting interview with Howard J. Smith, author of Beethoven in Love. I do love Beethoven. I love music. And we'll be talking with Michael Riedel later, so stay tuned, about Broadway. We're going to be joined by a very interesting guest, but first we're going to have our station identification. We are here on WOR 710 AM on your digital dial and iHeart Media Company, and we are sponsored by Stribling and Associates. This show is Stribling's New York. If you're buying, selling, or just thinking about it, you need to be connected to a top real estate professional. Contact Tony Simone, and he will connect you to an expert, which is usually him, at Simone, TSIMONE, at stribling.com. And today, we also have in our studio Tony, our producer. Tony Simone is sitting across from me, along with Jessica Lappin, who is the president of the Alliance for Downtown. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And Tony. So Tony has a list of questions for you. He's going to be running our interview. So why don't you?
Rob's running the interview. I don't have a list of questions. I'm just here because I'm really happy Jessica joined us. I've known Jessica for a long, long time. She has a great past, and I wanted you to come talk about the Alliance for Downtown, all the great work you're doing, and how you started there and what you've done before. A little about yourself first, and then
we have known each other for a long time. Well, I was a city councilwoman for 8 years, and that's how Tony and I got to know each other. I represented, at that time, the Upper East Side of Manhattan and East Midtown, which is the most densely populated residential part of the city. And now I'm running the Downtown Alliance in our sort of the heart of our commercial hub of New York.
So we've talked a lot about downtown because I'm an old geezer. I just turned 60 last week.
Happy
I think
birthday.
Everybody here forgot to give me my present.
happy birthday.
I like watches, Patek Philippe's especially. And,
A Rolex.
I do have a Rolex on. I got this many years ago when I was young. I have watched downtown evolve and change so dramatically. And we had Tracy Neeporn on here from Nobu and a Tribeca Grill, and we were talking about Ponte's restaurant, which when downtown used to be so desolate, Ponte's had a giant parking lot. Now space is at a premium here, and downtown has seen its ups and downs, especially with 9/11. So tell us how what we're doing now to help strengthen it.
It's been a complete transformation, and it's, of course, the city and this neighborhood has had its ups and downs. I actually went to Stuyvesant High School and was the first class to graduate from the building when it was opened in Battery Park City. And what Lower Manhattan was back then in the 90s, it's completely unrecognizable. And we had just been making some good progress, and then, of course, 9/11 happened, and it was, really back to basics. And I think people would never have predicted that 15 years later we would be where we are, that 3 times as many people live in Lower Manhattan today than did on 9/11. People said nobody would ever live there again. And they have come back in droves, and we have hit our employment numbers are now back to where they were on 9/11. And in fact, looking out through the end of the decade, we project 40,000 new private sector jobs. But the look and the feel of the neighborhood, it's tremendous. The transportation hubs, the World Trade Center buildings that have gone up, one which is a landmark already, open a year plus, and it's already a really important part of our skyline. So it's been kind of across all sectors and segments. What we have become, I think nobody would have expected, and we feel like the future is even brighter. We're at this moment where the Renaissance is beginning, but really just beginning.
How do we break up downtown? Because I'm a New Yorker, and I've lived here almost now for the past 40 years, and almost my entire life, 70-80% of my life. And New York used to be much more easier to explain and categorize. But I have some friends that moved into Battery Park City, and that is like a combination of a suburban lifestyle almost in a pocket of the corner of the city. People like walking through there, and it doesn't have an urban sensibility. It's just it's a thing unto itself.
Well, Lower Manhattan is a big area. It's 1 square mile. So it does have these wonderful pockets and sub-districts that comprise it. You've got the financial sector, you have Tribeca, you have Battery Park City, you have Water Street on the east side. There's enough square footage, commercial square footage on Water Street, that anywhere else in the country, that alone would be a major commercial hub. There's more there than in the city of Pittsburgh, for example. And that's just one block.
Just Water Street is bigger
Just
than
Water
Pittsburgh
Street.
or
It's
more
more commercial office
condensed.
I'm
space than
shocked by
Pittsburgh.
that.
Yeah. So, there are these wonderful sub-pockets. We like to say it's the New York you know but haven't met yet, because you can get lost and find yourself on a historic corner where George Washington was sworn in or said goodbye to his troops, or find yourself at the foot of the Geary Building, which is, one of these wonderful modern architectural gems. So it's this great juxtaposition of old and new. It's where the city began. It's where the country began. It's where millions of immigrants came to our shores, and yet it's very much on the cutting edge in terms of both the office space, but the type of company that is choosing to take up stock there. And one of the things, what's interesting about the transformation is we're now down to about 35% financial in terms of the makeup of our companies. So it's still Wall Street, it's still the capital of finance, but we're no longer a neighborhood that's really driven by the traditional industries of finance and insurance. It's become a really hot neighborhood for tech and media companies. Just last year, Time Inc. and Condé Nast fully moved in. And that has changed the whole vibe. You see people in hoodies walking across the 9/11 memorial, and you see people pushing baby carriages on Water Street, and just this very different look and feel of the neighborhood that wouldn't have been possible 5 or 10 years ago.
Well, you just brought up an interesting point, because I worked for many years for Time Inc. and wrote for People in Time Magazine, and so Time isn't really even in the Time and Life building anymore. Also, advertising agencies are moving down here too. So it's really not going to be the financial district anymore. It's redefining itself. Where are we going? Not just what's happening population-wise too, or people.
Well,
coming from
you talked
uptown.
about Time. That's interesting, because when Time and Condé moved down, and by the way, there's also the Daily News, the Commercial Observer just announced they're moving down. So
The Daily News has moved here.
the Daily News is on Water
They're not
Street.
They're not in the Daily News building anymore.
Harper
I didn't know
Collins,
that.
which was born on Broadway, Lower Broadway, has moved back. So that it's not surprising that then the advertising companies who are calling on these media companies have also moved downtown. Group M is the anchor tenant at 3 World Trade Center. Droga 5, which is a very large and growing advertising agency, has moved downtown. And, Mechanism, Barker, the list goes on. And so then the other thing we're starting to see, which makes sense given that media and advertising, is fashion. Gucci moving their headquarters downtown. Hugo Boss, Revlon, Bottega Veneta, I'm not pronouncing right, Bottega, they just are moving downtown. So, and their corporate offices, obviously Hudson's Bay is opening a Saks Fifth Avenue and an off Fifth.
That's fabulous.
And moving their corporate offices. So it's this whole, it makes sense, right? They're all interrelated, fashion, advertising, media, and it's really kind of fun and cool.
And all these people have to eat, which brings us to Wolfgang Puck.
To food, my favorite subject. We were a bit of a food desert for a while, and that has certainly started to change, and we're going to become a food destination. And you had the near Porinson, Tracy. Nobu is moving further downtown.
Yes.
Tribeca's too far north, which is amazing. He was a pioneer. They were a pioneer to open when they did, where they did. Danny Meyer was also a bit of a pioneer in Battery Park City and other places downtown. But now, if you're a named, top name chef, it's like you have to have an outpost downtown. We've got Colicchio and McNally opening new restaurants, Wiley Dufresne, April Breslin, Wolfgang Puck, and Jean-Georges.
So there seems no reason for me to stay on the Upper East Side. Tony, can you
I've
please
been
get
telling
me
you
an
that for a long
apartment?
time.
I want one tomorrow.
We have more and more folks who want to move downtown and walk to work,
Yes.
which is a new phenomenon.
It is, and the the Alliance 20 years ago had this novel at the time. It was a novel idea, which was to try and encourage the conversions of old office buildings into residential. And cities like London thought we were crazy and purposely went in the other direction and said we don't want residential in our commercial core, and have now realize what a mistake that was. So as these buildings converted, people started to move in, and they love that they can walk to work. And if you don't live nearby, we're the most accessible place on the planet, I like to say. I mean, you got 12 subway lines, the ferries, which are expanding.
Yes, tell us a little. I'm not going to ask any of my tough Mike Wallace questions here. This is a softball kind of show, but how are we going to get up and downtown, back and forth now? Besides the subways, what other modes of transportation are we adding? Because I know a lot of things are happening with ferries, but I don't know any of the fine points.
So the Mayor de Blasio has proposed a major expansion of citywide ferry service, really focused on the East River. And every single ferry, whether you're coming from Soundview in the Bronx or from Sunset Park or from Queens or from 90th Street on the Upper East Side, will all stop at Pier 11 in Lower Manhattan. So all of the ferries will bring you to Lower Manhattan.
This is a really interesting subject for me. We recently had Peter Penoyer, a world-renowned architect, on the show.
And a good friend of mine, as a matter of fact.
That's great. I love Peter. He was a wonderful guest. And we actually, what we didn't get to address, we talked so much about his books, was I have a book at home that talked about East End Avenue before the FDR Drive was built. It was populated by people who lived who worked on Wall Street. They lived there, they had docks, and they took their personal little boats down to their job on Wall Street. So I have gone to somewhere in the 90s to a Mets game, and I took the ferry there, and it was wonderful. What else? How's that being added to? What are we going to have?
So there is a pier there that you probably used that has not been in service. So part of this expansion would put that pier back into operation, and possibly one in the E60s as well. So they're going through the review process for that. So that will be just.
Will they take a Metro card?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the plan.
I'm in.
$2.75. I mean, the other thing that's amazing is how many people bike to work now, especially in Lower Manhattan, and that's just one more way. It's always amazing to me.
Do we have city bikes down here?
Absolutely.
I have an account.
Absolutely. And in fact, actually, the Alliance, it's funny, we had a pilot program before there was City Bike. We had our own little bike sharing program that we tested out that was kind of a forerunner.
Well, Tony, go ahead. I'm sorry. No. I insist. Please, young man.
Because I know before Jessica leaves us, I want to just make a point that, a lot of folks don't realize it was a concerted effort by not just government, but organizations like the Alliance for Downtown for years to get people to move down here. So it didn't just happen.
No, it didn't happen.
It didn't just say, let's all go downtown. I prefer to go downtown. There are organizations and folks, your board members, who actually made it happen after a terrible tragedy.
I should say, since this is an apolitical show, but this seems like a wonderful combination of business and the public sector coming together and building something really wonderful.
Yes, we are. I like to say we're at the nexus of public and private. And our job, which I just love getting up every day, is to make this neighborhood a vibrant, better place for the people who live here, for the people who work here, for everybody in the city. And it's a very committed group, and Tony mentioned our board, of civic leaders in the city, business leaders, but more than that, civic leaders who all are very dedicated. And after 9/11, absolutely could have walked away. And nobody would have faulted them, and they didn't. They were just so committed to bringing this neighborhood back, and it's been very inspiring for me to see. And those incentives that we needed, the financial incentives to get people to move, we don't need them anymore. I mean, there are no incentives now for conversions. I mean, at one point, you got cash money if you decided to move downtown, and certainly we don't need to do that. We have a little ways to go still in terms of the commercial stock and making sure it's full and fully leased. But on the residential side, people love living in the neighborhood. They love being close to the water. They love the new schools. They love the parks. They love the restaurants that are coming and being able to walk to work. And as we discussed, many of them do. So I feel pretty lucky to be part of this transformation and to be here at this moment.
Well, I'm glad that you joined us at this moment. Thanks so much for coming in. The next time you come back, maybe we'll have you and Peter on here, and we can really talk about how we're rebuilding New York. And it was wonderful for you to join us. Tony, thanks for sitting in here, too.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica.